When I say the terms endangered and extinct, you probably think of animals. However, endangered languages, or languages that are at high risk of vanishing due to lack of speakers, lead to extinct languages, or languages that have no living speakers left. Language loss is a monumental, worldwide problem and is happening at an even quicker rate than species extinction. In areas where polar bears live, Yupik is just one of the hundreds of languages that are endangered, and where the woolly mammoth once roamed, Tofa is just one of the many languages on the brink of extinction. For a frame of comparison, the number of endangered plant and animal species is less than 7% of the total known species. However, at 40%, we may lose nearly half of the world's known languages. These statistics were found by K. David Harrison, who is a renowned linguist, co-founder of the Living Tongues Institute, and team member of the National Geographic's Enduring Voices project. What this 40% breaks down to is that on average, a language vanishes every 2 weeks. So every 14 days, a complete grammar system encoded with ancestral knowledge that has been passed down for millennia disappears. With our hectic lives and busy calendars, the bi-weekly deaths pass us by unnoticed as our calendars fill with other things. My creative nonfiction project titled The Ancestors Said raises awareness about the current precarious state of the world's languages and people's endeavors to combat this loss. Specifically, I look at the Potawatomi language, which is a critically endangered Native American language, and Potawatomi members currently live in Ontario, Canada, and in parts of the U.S., including Ohio. Today I'm going to share 3 important concepts I discovered through my research about language loss, as well as some research that was influential in my understanding of creative nonfiction. So the first major theme is that language is culture, which I noticed throughout my research is that the inevitability of culture loss is attached to language loss. And part of my Living Archives research, I interviewed 4 Potawatomi members and a director of tribal development. Nearly each interviewee expressed the sentiment that language and culture are inextricably linked. Greg Howard, who is a member of the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, explained that we can say we're a tribe, but if the Potawatomi language dies off, a great big piece of who we are will die too. Language reflects what our culture values and contains information about these values, such as timekeeping, foraging, and agriculture. This year at Mount Union's Eckler lecture, the speaker emphasized that culture is ingrained into the language we use. Just as industrialization, capitalism, and masculinity make their way into our lexicon, cultural values make their way into endangered languages lexicon as well. For example, harmony with the natural world is reflected in the Potawatomi language through the language's categorization of nouns. Robin Wall Kimmer, a member of Citizen Potawatomi Nation and author of Braiding Sweetgrass, described in her book that nouns are ordered by animate and inanimate objects. Objects classified as living are not only animals and plants, but everything that occurs naturally, including rocks and rivers. While in English, we're taught that nouns are either a person, place, or thing, in Potawatomi, everything in nature is grouped in the same category as a person, which is living. And Harrison reports in his book, When Languages Die, that the Tofa people in endangered languages in Siberia have traditionally been reindeer herders, which has lended to an in-depth knowledge of the local land. This Tofa map on the right was produced in 1908 and is much more detailed than the Western maps of the same location. For example, it shows nearly 4 times as many named rivers. Unfortunately, around the 1980s, reindeer herding became unpopular, and now many Tofa could not recreate that same map. And in the Yupik language, a language spoken in an Alaskan village, there are not accurate English translations for their geographic and directional terms. As younger generations are increasingly speaking English, this directional and geographic knowledge is lost, according to an article in the Journal of Language, Identity, and Education. The second point is that we don't know what all we're losing. A 2007 New York Times article titled World's Languages Dying Off Rapidly mentions Kalawaya, an endangered language in the Andes Mountains. The Kalawaya use Spanish or Quechua in daily life, but have their own secret tongue used for preserving knowledge of medicinal plants. Upon further investigation, it was found that some of this knowledge was previously unknown. And as mentioned in a National Geographic article published earlier this year, some languages such as Ainu, which is a critically endangered language spoken in Japan, is an isolate, meaning that it has no relationship with any other known language. Upon the discovery and analysis of languages like Ainu and Kalawaya, ideas about language, communication, and Western society's knowledge base are called into question. When languages go extinct, we lose information as well as a valuable chance at improving our knowledge of neuroscience and communication. My third overall thing that I found is that digital technology is a problem and a cure. Many socio-political factors have contributed to language loss, such as oppressive and purposefully culturally exclusionary governmental policies. However, a more recent factor that has both contributed to language loss as well as helped preserve and revitalize languages is digital technology. Linguist David Crystal describes in his book Language Death that globalization has dissuaded some young people from learning their heritage language, as they instead focus on dominant world languages like English, German, or Chinese. The digital age has created a Western culture obsessed with hoarding every piece of information we create. From overfilled libraries to overfilled hard drives, the effect is similar. Members of Western society have historically looked down upon many indigenous languages because they are oral, lacking physical representation. Only recently have many oral languages adopted a written language. And one of the biggest challenges when creating a written form of an oral language, or when using the written form, is trying to retain the oral culture, trying to retain the inflection, cadence, and sound as much as possible, so that the dictionaries and written forms contain not only the knowledge about the natural world, but the life of the cultures as well. And while there have been huge pushes towards creating written forms, there are many benefits to oral culture, which Harrison explains in his book, When Languages Die. He says, oral cultures resemble well-polished rocks. All the rough edges have been smoothed, as the rock has passed through many minds and through generations of transmission, repetition, and memorization. What is left is the essential core, finely wrought and perfectly fitted to its niche of human memory. So digital technology helps preserve and revitalize these oral and written languages alike through the use of capabilities such as digital recording and the internet. So we see this through WikiTongues, which is a language nonprofit that was founded in 2014, and it has its own YouTube channel with over 36,000 subscribers. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, has a YouTube channel and its own multimedia archives. And the Enduring Voices Project, which was a collaboration between the Living Tongues Institute and National Geographic, also has its own YouTube channel. Here you can see a woman watching back a recording of herself singing a traditional song in Koro, which is an endangered language in India. Now that I've shared some important findings about the topic of my project, I'm going to share some of my research about writing in the genre. The second edition of a field guide for science writers contained advice about explanatory and narrative writing, which helped shape my understanding of how I could bring my statistics and facts to life. A chapter by Robert Canigal, who writes for publications such as the New York Times Magazine and Johns Hopkins Magazine, was especially inspiring. Canigal encourages writers to choose to tolerate for a while the writerly excesses and keep open a little longer to the noisy, intrusive yelps of your imagination. Canigal's advice inspired me to ensure I was making use of one of a writer's most valuable archives, the archive of memory and imagination. As much as I love the cut and dry details about language loss, I wanted to use the creative nonfiction genre to make the subject interesting and accessible to a wider audience. In the book Creative Nonfiction, author Philip Gerard lists the 5 hallmarks that make nonfiction creative. One of the most challenging hallmarks for me during this project was telling a good story. So I decided to look through Floyd and Rebecca Skloot's 2011 Best American Science Writing for inspiration. Burkhard Bilger wrote Nature's Spoils, which is a piece that was published in The New Yorker. I was most inspired by his opening scene to establish the setting for his story. It took me a while to decide on my opening scene as I struggled to find a good hook in an appropriate setting. Julia Whitty's piece, BP's Deep Secrets, which was published in Mother Jones, did exceptionally well, I thought, at interweaving research with narrative, something that I'm still working on in my piece, finding the balance between facts and story. And in terms of character, I decided to take a cue from Michael S. Rosenwald, who wrote The Messy Maid, and I decided to make myself a protagonist. Unlike Rosenwald, I wasn't directly experiencing the topic I was writing about. However, I was able to use the experience that first made me aware of language loss as an opportunity to relate to the audience and establish a familiar setting in a topic that can feel very foreign. I was also able to foreshadow aspects of digital technology and information overload that I mentioned later on in my piece. According to UNESCO's Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger, these languages each have 50 or less remaining speakers, almost a sure sign of their death. As languages continue to disappear from the planet, we are losing information. Information about the natural world, information about the human brain, and information about the past. In a time when knowledge about human capacities to communicate, remember, stay healthy, and live in harmony with the earth are of critical importance, it's essential to use the tools we have, including digital tools, to preserve and revitalize the world's dying languages. In a time when we hoard our own culture's information, it's important to recognize that we alone don't have all the answers, and it's important to remember that the best way we can move forward is collectively, when voices and ideas from every culture are heard. Thank you.